the BitGeek podcast. I'm your host, Ron Avis, and sitting with me on the couch to my left is the Prince of Pixels himself,
Nick Wright.
And today we're going to be paying tribute to Street Fighter. All right, Nick. So here we are. We're doing a. We're experimenting with a new format. We're not doing a top 10 list or 10 favorite or anything. We're going to do a tribute to a topic, and that topic is going to be Street Fighter.
Yeah. I may actually start playing Street Fighter 5 now because finally they've announced, I guess it was like yesterday or the day before, I forget which, that there's actually going to be an arcade mode in Street Fighter 5 after 2 years.
Now, Street Fighter 5 was a big deal. It really was a big deal. Like Sony ponied up a lot of money. To make Street Fighter 5 an exclusive. And it's also on Steam, I think. But,
yeah, it is.
You know, for consoles, you can only play it on PlayStation. So when 5 came out, we were both interested. You especially were interested.
Yeah, I mean, because I've always loved the Street Fighter games. And, and I played the beta of it. And the beta, it was online only. But, that was kind of to be expected because, right. I mean, that's what they're doing is they're really, they're testing out their netcode and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And, so I didn't really think anything of, like, an arcade mode not being in the beta. And honestly, when I realized that the beta was only online, I didn't even really play the beta all that much. And I just kind of thought, well, I'll just wait for the final game to come out. Final game comes out, and that's all it was. It was just, it's online only. And there was, like, no, like, one player, like, just fight through the computers and just kind of enjoy yourself kind of thing. 'Cause I mean, I'm old. I don't like playing against like these people online that they're just. It's not like, because don't get me wrong, I play against other human beings like in arcades back in the day. I mean, that was great. I loved it.
That's what made Street Fighter so fun.
But the online, it's just not the same, and
people are punks online.
Yeah,
they're just straight up punks.
And I mean, the gamers that have grown up with it, that they know no different and they love it and that's what they do and that's great. But
right.
I came from the arcades and I just haven't been able to get into it.
I've never been into trash talking, and I'm not saying all people trash talk online. You can find like a good, occasionally find like some respectful.
Everybody was like so polite like in the arcades. I mean, it was always good games, and
I never once had anybody like trash talk me in the arcades.
I mean, and like somebody would get like a big combo on you or something, and it was like, I mean, it was always that respect, like nice.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like, oh, lag is the only reason you beat me, like that kind of like talk.
I mean,
everything was, you're not really skilled.
You're on the receiving end of it, and you're like, nice.
Yeah.
There was respect.
The skill was appreciated. I'm right there with you, man. But so 5 came out. It was online only, no arcade mode.
Yeah, and so I admittedly just never really played it that much.
I don't really understand why Sony spent all the money to acquire the rights, and then released a game that, from my perspective, because I was interested, but once I found out there was no arcade mode, and it seemed like their plan was to trickle out characters, like they do nowadays. DLC, yeah. Probably one of the worst examples of DLC, honestly.
Yeah.
Just give us all the characters. That's how it used to be. You got all the characters. And, a new edition might come out that included some characters, but, that was different. There was enhancements that were being worked on too. Not like just like dishing or just doling out one character every other month. Yeah. And Street Fighter is not the first to do it. There's other, games that have done it. And, people seem to like it in a way. I guess the news cycle keeps it fresh.
I mean, and I guess to be fair, at least Capcom was, they had this plan that You could spend actual money to buy the characters if you wanted, and I don't know, they're like $5 a piece or something. And typically they're released like every other month. I think they would have a new character. But if you played the game a lot, then you would get fight money, and you could buy the characters with the points that you've
So
earned.
there was an in-game currency.
That you've earned within the game, and so that's cool.
That is cool.
But since I didn't really play the game, I'm not earning these.
You're not
points,
earning any
so,
in-game currency. So when does the arcade mode come out?
January or February, I forget which. I think January of 2018.
Did you say it was going to be like, if you don't already own it, it was only going to be like $40?
Yeah, if you don't already own the game, then you can buy the game. And I just read too that you can buy the game, but it comes with like a key to download the extra characters. But you get like the season 1 and season 2 characters that have been released thus far for $39.99, I think it is. So
but if you own the game already,
$40.
arcade mode is just going to be a free patch.
Yeah, if you already own it, it's a free download. So that's cool. But on the same note, it's like you if you don't already own it, you get everything for like $40.
Well, Destiny was like that too. Like if you bought vanilla Destiny,
like everything. Like
I know. Yeah.
$60 for the game.
It's like punishing the loyal.
Probably another $60 for all the characters if you bought them all.
Yeah. But if you're one of those people that needs it when it comes out, you're going to pay more. If you're like cool with waiting for the gold edition or the game of the year edition, you're going to get everything all at once.
And it is 2 years later, so you know, if you waited for 2 years, then
that's a really patient Street Fighter fan.
Yeah. So.
And I would fall into that category, but I'm not a huge Street Fighter fan like I was way back in the day.
And yes, the Street Fighter 2 days. I mean, that was the peak.
Yeah, and what we're going to do on the show is we're actually going to kind of chronologically go over all of the releases of Street Fighter. And, we're going to talk more in depth with Street Fighter 2 because that's the height of Street Fighter Mania.
That's what we played the most.
That's what we played the most. We played it nonstop in arcades, at home on our consoles. Mm-hmm. We'd study the combos from magazines. I mean, it was like everything to us.
There's like the proper grip, like you could either like that or
yeah. And this bad boy here was my Super Nintendo controller, and I'm happy that I didn't keep a lot of stuff. Like I don't have the museum that you or like Martin have, but I've kept a few things. This bad boy is special to me. Yeah. It's just awesome. Yeah. We're gonna kind of talk about Street Fighter chronologically, and we will spend the majority of our time in Street Fighter 2, but we will of course go over all of the arcades pretty much. If it was mostly a Street Fighter game, we're gonna be going over it.
Yeah. So, flashback to 1987.
Yeah.
The original Street Fighter comes out and nobody knows about it. I mean,
not a person.
We didn't have a clue.
Well, there were people that cared about it. I found it interesting. I saw the movie It. Yeah. It's like a big hit nowadays. In the movie It, one of the characters, his goal for the summer was to become the best Street Fighter player.
Oh, really? I haven't seen it yet.
It's really good. It's awesome. Can't recommend it enough. But yeah, the kid in one of the scenes, like he's looking for that friend, and he runs into like the arcade, and he's playing Street Fighter.
Yeah, that's cool.
and I know Street Fighter was a thing. It was around, but it's just like wasn't on our radar yet. Because for me at that time, the fighting games were a bit slower paced. I was, Karate Champ, stuff like that was popular. Mm-hmm. I didn't play it a whole lot, but at least I was aware of Karate Champ. And maybe I just didn't give it a chance or much of a look. It wasn't like a game either that was saturated in arcades.
Yeah.
Because maybe I might have given it a look too. Like it wasn't like Space Invaders or, Pac-Man or whatever. It was a game that was out quite a bit. Interesting. I have some little factoids that I want to share as we go along. One that's cool factoid was there were 2 configurations of the original Street Fighter arcade.
Yeah, originally it had like those pressure sensitive buttons.
Yeah,
it was like
there was like one button. There was one big button for punch and one big button for kick, and depending on how hard you pressed it, determined the strength of the.
But
the
those
attack.
ended up breaking all the time, so they decided to go a different route.
Yeah, so then we get like that more familiar button layout. But yeah, 1987 Street Fighter. Nick, you know way more about Street Fighter, and we've mentioned Street Fighter in the past. It came up in our disappointments episode, I think, or maybe it was our E3, or maybe both.
Oh, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, we've mentioned it, so we don't have to go into a great detail, but you discovered Street Fighter after Street Fighter 2.
Right, yeah.
And-
And I actually, I found it like, just happened to come across it like at a gas station or something. Like, oh, hey, look, it's Street Fighter. Hey, I'd like to play it since, I like Street Fighter 2.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's awful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it would be awful after playing Street Fighter 2, because the games are way different. I mean, the idea's there.
It's
You had a character select, kind of. It was just Ken and Ryu.
It just didn't have the controls. Like, it had the fireballs and dragon punches and the hurricane kicks, but you couldn't just like do it on command like you can, in Street Fighter 2.
The controls weren't as tight.
Yeah, you just had to be like, and just, hope that
And
it
then
worked.
accidentally get something come out.
You just kept randomly just hitting buttons and shaking the controller as hard as you could, and like, oh, I did a fireball.
Yeah, so we'll just say that Street Fighter, it had potential, but it was not a great game.
Yeah.
Then Street Fighter gets a little interesting. Final Fight was a big arcade.
Yeah, and 1989 is when that came out, and it began development as the sequel to Street Fighter. But Double Dragon, I think, was kind of the big thing around that time, and so they decided to kind of take a different route, and they ended up calling it Final Fight, and so it ended up evolving into its own thing.
Which in some of the console releases of Street for like the Versus games, aren't there like isn't Hager like a playable character in some of those games?
Oh yeah, like in the new like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, he's a character in there. Yeah.
I know Cody comes up from time to time.
They're in the same universe because a lot of Final Fight characters have made it into Street Fighter games.
Right.
But they're definitely in the same universe. But,
so Capcom, like they thought they had something interesting. They didn't. They went it with Final Fight. That was a big hit. Then they were like, well, let's take the Ken character and drop him into a Nintendo game. So Street Fighter 2010,
The Final Fight
came out in 1990.
I've never even played that game.
I've never played it either.
I have no idea what
it's
like.
one of those games that you see in the bargain bin
Yeah.
all the time. And I remember seeing it was a Capcom game. And, it had that familiar purple box. And
aside from, like, the main character's name is Ken and, like, the title is Street Fighter, that's about as close of a connection as I think you get.
Right, that's it. But the Ken character continued. So that was 90. But then the moment happens when arcades were changed forever.
Yeah, 1991, Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior.
World Warrior comes out. But it was a slow burn. It wasn't like a success right away. I remember seeing it for the first time in our like a Walmart arcade or something. Like it didn't take arcades by storm. It didn't seem like right away. It didn't take too long, but
and I don't even really remember. It was just kind of like the buzz at school. Like people were like talking about it or whatever, and because I went and sought it out just because I was hearing like how great this game is.
Yeah.
And like so I see it like at a bowling alley one time or something, and so I'm playing it, I'm putting quarters in, and I'm like going through the characters, and I don't have a clue. I'm just hitting buttons.
I remember being overwhelmed by the number of buttons.
Yeah.
And
so I'm just like so I finally like as I keep losing and I pick a different character to see maybe if I like this character better. I made it like to Blanca. And just like randomly hitting buttons, it seemed like that was the one that I kind of was winning a couple of fights with.
Right.
So I kind of stuck with Blanca for like my very first introduction of the game, just for that reason alone.
Guile was the character that I thought looked cool. He was the American fighter.
Yeah.
And he just had a neat look to him. So I picked Guile, and I was pulling off the sonic booms pretty easily.
You even knew how to do it?
I
at
think it
that
was on
time?
the arcade. I think that I think there was something on the arcade cabinet.
What, on the bezel? No.
No, I don't know. But I was pulling off a Sonic Boom somehow. Well, as you see in the attract mode, so like I did it. I figured it out. I did it. I know I did.
Because I remember like going to school, like after I had checked it out and I played it a few times, to like going to one of my friends that was familiar with it, and I was like, because I knew there were fireballs, that this is like something that they can do. So I remember asking like one of my friends like, how do you do a fireball? And so he would kind of explain it, and yeah, I don't really remember how long like it took to learn these things, but
Well, it was bananas
evolved
because they
from
had
there.
special moves,
Yeah.
and not the special moves that came later on in the game, but like a fireball was crazy.
Yeah, like with these special command inputs.
Right.
Spin the joystick a quarter circle towards the opponent and hit a punch button.
Yeah.
Those things were unheard of. No, nobody did that.
Right, right. So, you start getting a feel. And I remember thinking, like, well, why would anybody waste their time with jabs and mediums? Like fierce.
Yeah, yeah.
That's going to do the damage. But, you learn. The thing I love about Street Fighter is it's one of those games, and it comes up quite a bit. It's one of those, like, cliches in gaming to where, like, anybody can jump in and have some success. Button mashing.
Yeah.
But once you start getting into that like skilled level where you start understanding the moves and the combos, there's no way you're gonna lose to a button masher.
Oh yeah, yeah. They won't even.
You see
touch
every
you.
move coming.
Yeah.
If a guy's jumping into you there's every character has like a move to repel them, and you can keep them far away with a projectile. Like there's just no way you're gonna lose to a novice player, and I really like that. That not a lot of the fighting games can say that. I feel like there's some fighting games like a Tekken game where like even like a novice can get lucky and beat a skilled player.
Yeah, I know I feel that way like when I'm playing in the arcade, that all I got to do is just like hit buttons and I'll beat the game.
Yeah, just hot punch, like punch, and like something cool will happen.
I haven't played enough like human opponents that are good at Tekken, to really be able to say whether that would be effective. I don't know.
So, was it? I guess magazines like EGM would print out the complete moves list. We didn't have the internet at the time.
Yeah, it had to have been like in magazines or something. I don't know where I saw like my first move list. I don't even remember.
Yeah, I don't either, to be honest. But I have a feeling like that Bible was getting filled out by like asking people how the moves went, and then probably by like reading in magazines.
Yeah,
because the magazines would give you mostly the
that
basics.
stuff down in the little black book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Street Fighter 2 came out and it was a great game, but Capcom, understanding they had a hit on their hands, I guess like I feel like a tidbit since we're just talking about the development of Street Fighter 2. It's interesting that Street Fighter 2 was almost delayed because the programmers, what was it, Chun-Li's legs. Like they had 2 or 3 different iterations of what Chun-Li's legs were going to look like in the arcade. Yeah, like the look of it.
Even since Street Fighter 2, they were talking about her monster
starting with Street Fighter 2, like the stockings and stuff. Like they had it, and then they were like, no, we want to do it another way. Like they were really obsessed over Chun-Li's legs.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, so it was they almost went over budget and caused a delay with the release of Street Fighter 2.
Because I know, like, in the original Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior, like, her portrait, she looks different, because she's got, like, an orange outfit in the portrait than in, like, the finished game sprite when you're actually playing as her. She's got, like, a blue outfit.
Yeah, maybe that has something to do with it. I know there's also some differences, too, in, like, those cinematics. Like, I didn't write those down necessarily. But, there was like the famous Shenlong misinterpretation, mistranslation.
The April Fool's joke with EGM. Yeah, you must defeat Shenlong to stand a chance.
Yeah, well, it came from that, right? The April Fool's Day joke. Like somebody had a little fun because what was it supposed to be? The actual translation.
He's referring to the Dragon Punch. You must defeat my Dragon Punch.
Right. But anyways, I just wanted to throw in that like little Chun-Li fact that game like was almost delayed and brought But to where we were gonna go. So 91 was the World Warrior. Then 2 came out, or Champion Edition in 1992.
So now they've upgraded it, let you play as the bosses and let you play as mirror matches, like because in the other game if somebody picked Ryu then you couldn't pick Ryu.
Yeah.
And I guess I should probably do a more unique character because then you can be like, well, you just picked Ken.
Is it Ryu or Ryu? Because that's another Street Fighter thing, like the pronunciation.
I've always said Ryu. Well, I can't say I've always said
Ryu.
There was one point in time where I thought Ryu was correct, and so I kind of switched up because that's what I believe to be correct. But in games lately, that now they have like the voice like Ryu wins. Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking that's the way it goes now. Okay. I hear it in the game now.
Well, if you research it, people make claims like they know it as fact because. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but anyways, so Street Fighter 2. We'll just say Ryu, right? Yeah. Can we just agree it's Ryu?
Yeah, and that's what I say.
So. Okay, so yeah, you see had the mirror colors, like both people could be Ryu or your favorite character. You got the different colors.
If you wanted to be Chun-Li, and the one person picked Chun-Li, and you can't pick Chun-Li because that slot's already taken. Yeah. So now you can do like pick the same character versus the same character.
But the big deal is the bosses. Like you could finally play as the bosses, and for the first time, really in an arcade that I can think of, you have like an upgraded version of a game coming out. It's basically Street Fighter, but just with extra stuff.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, can't really think of a time. Well, I guess I kind of did that with Pac-Man a little bit. Maybe that they would kind of tweak the boards and do different things, and a lot of times illegally.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. More like illegal hacks. And Street Fighter has an interesting history with illegal hacks. We'll be coming up on that soon. But so 92 Champions Edition came out, and it got even bigger.
Yeah, and so then people want fast, and so then they come out with the Turbo Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting.
Yep. Which is, we might as well go ahead and talk about the hacks. Like. One of the tidbits that I found out, and this is probably well known from Street Fighter fans, but for those who didn't know, that when Champions Edition came out, apparently a lot of arcade owners were underwhelmed. You had to buy, I think, the cabinet again. Like I'm pretty sure, like you had to rebuy it.
They didn't. I think they had like upgrade kits and cabinets. I think there was both.
Okay.
You could either get the full blown cabinet or you could upgrade. Well, I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, well, I didn't. That's not the fact. It's just the fact that I'm coming up with is there were people disappointed with the small difference. Like there were bosses, and that's big, but it's basically the same game.
Yeah.
And arcade owners were like, well, this is cool, but like I want something a little more. People started hacking the game.
Those hacks were coming out. We actually came across one of those hacks.
Street Fighter 2 Rainbow Edition?
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know if like the one that we saw was like actually the one, dubbed Rainbow Edition, but that's one of many.
They say if you're playing Rainbow Edition, I believe, if like the Street Fighter 2 is like a rainbow.
Yeah, the one we saw was not, because I remember it clearly because it looked like it was like metal. It was like all silver, like metal. The Street Fighter 2 logo.
Yeah, and this was well after like Street Fighter Turbo was out.
No, Turbo wasn't out.
Oh, it wasn't?
I don't think, because Turbo came out like in response to these, I think.
Yes, it did.
And Champions Edition, this was like in the Champions Edition time, and it was a hack of Champions Edition.
Yeah, Capcom was having a big problem with people hacking their stuff.
Because you could do things like if you hit the start button, it would change like right mid-fly, right in the game, like change to like a different character. So you could just like cycle through like every single character.
E Honda had a fireball with like he could do his 100-hand slap and fireballs would come out.
Yeah, he did the slap and
you could jump in midair.
the fireballs would be wavy.
Yeah.
Like you throw out a fireball and it would be like 2 fireballs.
It was
like
completely
that.
bananas, but
And
really fun.
If you did the jab button, it would be like super slow. And if you did like the fierce button, it would be like so fast you didn't even see it coming.
Yeah, and you could knock people back into that slow fireball.
Yeah, you could throw more than one on screen at once. So if you did
Oh, it was crazy.
You did the slow ones, you just kept throwing like you'd have like 100 like fireballs coming. It was getting all glitchy and slow.
Now
down.
that's a game where like skill could get overcome by just throwing like millions of fireballs on the screen, but you could just sit up in midair and do fireballs in midair.
You could do stuff in it. You could do like Zangief spinning pile driver.
Yeah, remember flames were coming out of his heels or whatever. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was hilarious. No competitive Street Fighter player would probably play it, take it seriously, but we just laughed.
It was fun to just screw around with.
For sure.
Yeah.
So apparently, the Turbo game was a response to that. So, the developers went back to the powers that be and said, playing Champions Edition now is like playing it underwater after you've seen, these packed versions. They're faster, and people seem to be more like they're interested in this. They want it to go faster. Mm-hmm. And apparently there was some pushback. So like, well, we programmed Street Fighter to play a certain way. It has to be played at that speed because we developed the whole game around it that way. But, they eventually gave in. And they released, and I'm always get the names confused, but Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting.
Right.
1992.
Yeah.
So that came out in earnest officially. And, it was great. I loved, like, I agree. Like, going back to the old style of Street Fighter is, for me, really hard after you played Turbo because it's like 20% faster, 25%
really
faster.
Sped up. And now Chun-Li's got a fireball.
Yeah.
Ryu and Ken can now do the hurricane kick in the air.
Yeah, and apparently, like, they were inspired by some of these crazy mods. They're like, like, maybe we can use some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really cool if you think about it. They didn't just thumb their nose at it and they're like, well, these, amateur hackers like tearing up our game. Like, we're instead of like taking it personally, they kind of learned from it.
Blanca got like his anti-air rolling attack that would go up in the air.
Yeah. So, when that game came out, I think that was my favorite, kind of going back over to the console edition just a hair. The Super Nintendo version, which was on the NES Classic, I think that was my favorite version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Turbo for me, it's the height of Street Fighter popularity. Mm-hmm. I liked the quickness.
I think it is definitely. I think it's the peak for me too. It's where I played the most. Because later on, because I could say that I think Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is probably my favorite of the Street Fighter 2 series, and and it's pretty much basically it's the last one. Technically not anymore, but it pretty much was for the longest time.
Yeah, for me, it was too.
But it also, I don't know if it was because arcades didn't really. I don't know why it was. I didn't see that one like out in the wild as much. I only saw that like in a couple places, and so I didn't really get to play it all that terribly much. But anyway, we've kind of jumped ahead a couple now.
Yeah, well, 92 was that. 93, we got Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers, which was also important because it introduced
and now it was on new hardware. Like, because Street Fighter, the series before had been on the CPS-1 hardware, and so now they've come out with the CPS-2 hardware, and they brought out Super Street Fighter 2.
And that makes sense, too, because I remember the backgrounds being a little more elaborate, better looking.
The audio was different. Mm-hmm. And you got 4 new characters.
Yeah, we got DJ, T-Hawk,
Cammy, and Fei Long.
Fei Long, the Bruce Lee character. Yeah. And they were fun characters to play with.
Yeah.
I liked all of those guys. So then we got that final, I think, Super Nintendo game.
Yeah. Yeah, Super came out on both Genesis and Super Nintendo.
Right, but we were more interested in the Super Nintendo. It just seemed better. I don't know why. Because it was superior hardware, I'm sure. But that was pretty much like the peak. And I've played Street Fighter games since then, but it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good run from like 91 to like 93, 94. That's a pretty impressive run for a game, which basically was Street Fighter 2. Like there wasn't like a true sequel until years later. So after that we had Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Right. Which introduced Akuma.
Got Akuma there. And also that like fireball where you could kind of fireball from the sky from up in the air. I wonder if that was inspired also from.
Well, Akuma did the fireball in the air. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, in Akuma was basically the Shenlong April Fool's joke.
Exactly, yeah. Again, Capcom just kind of having fun with the mythology from the fans.
Yeah.
They are always willing to do that, which is cool. And Akuma, to me, feels like, you were a big Akuma fan.
Yeah.
You liked him quite a bit. That move, that finishing move, very difficult.
The Raging Demon.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult.
Is it not that? It seems difficult to me.
No.
Well, like the Zangief pile driver move, like you do with ease now, but for me it's difficult.
Yeah.
We really haven't talked about like who our favorite character. We talked about our entry points, but when I say favorite characters, we really have two sets of favorite characters.
We do, because I mean I would have to say, I always kind of just go back to Ryu. But yeah, there was that time in the arcade where we decided that, hey, let's learn and get good with characters that we don't see people using all that often. And at the time, that was for me Zangief, and for you
Balrog. Yeah. The boxer to who I never once saw anybody play.
Yeah, nobody ever plays. But I mean, they're now like with the newer games, people do play these characters. But yeah, back then, like nobody ever did.
We were cocky. We were cocky guys. Like we were winning with regularity because Ken was the guy that I would always fall back. If we'd play our cocky characters and lose, we'd fall back to that. Run back to Ken or Ryu.
Okay, let's see.
I see. Then. You want to like beat me? Okay, so I want to play for real.
We did good though with Zangief and Balrog.
Yeah, we really did, and it was always a lot of fun to see people like get frustrated that they lost with these characters.
Yeah, because
they always thought it was luck at first.
Yeah, because at that time it would be like, oh, he's playing Balrog. He doesn't know what he's doing.
No, right. This was my first time, and I remember like playing dumb sometimes too.
Oh yeah, we did. Like, let's see how this guy does.
He looks powerful.
Yeah, I forgot we kind of acted like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we weren't jerks, but we were kind of, I guess it was kind of like being a jerk.
Yeah.
They caught on pretty fast that we actually knew what we were doing.
It was all in fun.
I remember the one time we were at the fair and they had the Street Fighter, and I kept beating people with Balrog, and there was this one guy in particular that was really getting frustrated. But yeah, But it was so fun, Like I can't think of any other game that I've ever played where, like, just beating it with like who you liked the best or thought you were the best with wasn't enough. Like, I think you'd mentioned we would challenge ourselves with like Double Dragon 2. It was like challenging ourselves. Mm-hmm. Let's beat it with a character that's considered weak.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, because like Street Fighter 2. Yeah, I went through and beat it with everybody.
Yeah.
At some point.
At some point, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Tidbit fact time. Zangief, that character, was originally going to have... His name was like Vodka.
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
I think his original working name was going to be Vodka something, but they considered it to be insensitive, I believe. So they didn't, because he was Russian.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. All right, so... transitioning to like what I would call like the second coming of Street Fighter games, after the Super Street Fighter Turbo, and then we got to mention the movie.
Oh yeah, so the movie came out
in 95.
95.
Yeah, and of course we were all over that. I read that Jean-Claude Van Damme was going to be playing Guile. He was big. He was real big at the time. And I was like, cool, man, an actual like martial artist movie star is going to be in it. It's going to be legit. Then I saw they casted Raul Julia as Bison.
Yeah, it's like, really?
Question mark? But the movie took other weird liberties too.
And the movie was awful.
Yeah, it was a turd.
Yeah, and it just like Blanca, for instance, where it kind of they combined that whole thing of Guile was looking for his friend Charlie,
Yeah.
to where like they just took like this guy, and like Raul Julia's Bison is like looks at his name tag and he's like Carlos Blanca. Charlie. like all of a sudden you get Charlie from Carlos.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, yeah, because Blanco in the games was just like some, he was like in the Amazon or something. Like it was mysterious, I guess, what his backstory was.
Yes, I can't even how they combine those two characters, because they're definitely two totally different characters. And
I saw a funny clip where the actor playing Ken basically called Ryu every incarnation of that name that people mispronounce throughout the movie.
And in the movie, they call him Ryu Hoshi.
Well, he called him Ryu, he called him Ryu, they called him Ryu. I mean, it was really funny. The clip that I found really kind of like makes it hilarious. So the movie came out, so they released a game.
Man, don't even get me started on Dawson in the movie.
Oh yeah,
he's a scientist that creates Blanca.
Well, and then they just kind of grouped some people together, like
E
Honda and
like
the Balrog
cameraman.
Yeah, and he was like the muscle security or like something. It was terrible, folks. Absolutely awful movie.
Yeah, I guess actually Balrog, is the cameraman.
Yeah, I think Balrog.
Honda's like what, the van driver?
I don't know. It's like, we gotta have these guys in. I also read too, like an interesting little factoid that in the original filming of the movie, there were no because it was going to be a rated R movie. Like there was a rated R cut.
Really, I didn't.
Yeah, because of the mostly for the violence, and there was some blood, so they had to get it down to PG-13. So they trimmed some of the movie, quite a bit of it, and they end up reshooting some scenes where I guess they were like, there's no signature moves in this movie. Like dragon punches and stuff. So they filmed a bunch of extra scenes where like Ken does like a thing that looks like the dragon punch, and Vega does like a roll or whatever.
Does his roll,
yeah.
And I remember there's one part where like Ryu,
I think it wasn't even like a
he just like punches him like that,
right.
And there's like just the slightest like blue flash.
It was like the force of the hit with the palm that knocked him back, not like a projectile. That was really shoehorned in. But, to be fair, probably in the arcade, we were, like, happy to see it, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Like, look, he did a dragon.
Right, that was the extent of it.
He did the Hadouken.
Instead of going like, this movie's not very good, is it, Nick? So, like, we would go like, ha, dragon punch.
Right, yeah.
But the Vega roll thing was executed decently, I suppose. And then, Van Damme does the splits probably at one point, as he does.
He did do kind of the flash kick. He kind of did like a flip kick kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I do kind of remember getting kind of excited, like, oh, I did the flash kick.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know any better. I mean, movies adapted from games has had a rocky road, to say the least. Yeah. Mortal Kombat might have been the best to do it. Yeah, and that's just tells you all you need to know right there, because it's not a great movie. But, you do get a little tickled when they do that stuff.
That was kind of the start of it, I guess, really.
Street Fighter?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there was probably a couple movies maybe before that based on video games, but not terribly many.
Not too many. More they tried a few times with comics and cartoons, but, again, not very good, not very well. Yeah. It might have been. Yeah, and there was even like a Chun-Li sequel that came out years later.
Oh, yeah, and that was awful too.
Never saw it. Actually.
Oh, I have seen it, yeah.
Isn't Charlie in it?
Don't watch it.
Okay. I won't.
I don't remember. I just remember.
Your brain started shielding you from it.
I know it involved Bison and Vega. Because Vega was like the guy from Black Eyed Peas. I don't know his name.
Oh, yeah?
But yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
You'll have to look that up.
I'll have to look that up. Really?
Yeah.
That's really weird. I want to say, what's his name? Jerry O'Connell was, or maybe there was another movie with Charlie where Jerry O'Connell was. I don't know, man. The point was they're not very good.
It's awful.
But anyways, to get back on track, there was that arcade game that came out, and it was like the Mortal Kombat style.
Yeah.
I only ever saw that once in the arcades.
At the fairgrounds is where I saw it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think me too.
Yeah.
And I didn't even want to play it. I saw it and I was like, that just looks so bad.
You know, and there's really like two versions of it because the consoles of the time, Saturn and PlayStation, got a Street Fighter the movie game, and it's totally different than that arcade version of it.
I wonder if it's any better. Like they put some extra time, TLC
Well,
in it.
It basically they play like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, just with digitized graphics.
Okay.
Whereas the Street Fighter the movie game, it had like new moves and stuff that like I can't even think of examples of some of those new moves. Like seems like Sagat did something with his eye patch or something. I forget. I don't even.
Does Honda try to run you over with a bus
No.
or the van?
Yeah,
Balrog hits you with a camera.
I kind of remember liking it like at first because it did neat things like Vega when he did like his roll with the claw.
Yeah.
It was like multi-hit. Like he would roll and then he would be like da 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 da.
Okay.
You know, it'd be like kind of a 4 or 5 hit kind of thing instead of just stick out the claw with one hit. And so, I thought that was like really cool, and like so Vega was like instantly my favorite character in the Street Fighter the movie game.
Yeah, you were pretty good with Vega. You would frustrate me with him sometimes. I remember there was a moment with E Honda in the movie too where he gets like pissed and he does that like thing like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so the movie game, the Street Fighter arcade, the movie, or no, it was Street Fighter the movie, I guess is what it was called.
Yeah.
So that was 95. But then we get back to better games. So Street Fighter 2 had kind of come to a close for the most part, and then a new series was introduced, and that was the Street Fighter Alpha.
Yeah, arcade, so that goes kind of back in time in the Street Fighter lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it takes place before Street Fighter 1.
A prequel of sorts.
Or actually, I take it back. It's not before Street Fighter 1. It's right after Street Fighter 1. Because Ryu's already beaten Sagat. So it's after Street Fighter 1, but before Street Fighter 2. It's in between the two games.
Yeah, wasn't the schoolgirl like real, like she was just like a Ryu's biggest fan or something like that? Because she had
that's
moves
not even
like...
until the next game.
Oh, was that too?
She wasn't even in Street Fighter, the first Street Fighter Alpha. So.
Yeah, Alpha I remember seeing in the arcades, like at the movies or something a couple times. But
Alpha, it introduced...
air blocking.
Yeah, air blocking was a thing. Alpha counters.
Counters, parries, and stuff like that, yeah.
And it brought back Birdie from Street Fighter 1. He looked very different, though. He was kind of a big hulking kind of black guy where he looked like a tall, skinny white guy in Street Fighter or Street Fighter 1.
Time does that to him, person, I guess. That was a pretty good game. Like, I liked it.
It was a good game. I really liked the art style. It was kind of an anime kind of looking style.
It really did have like an anime look to it.
You have that Street Fighter movie. The Legend of Chun-Li is sitting on your shelf, but you've never seen it.
Oh my god, hang on. Wait, right here. You're absolutely right.
So you've never seen it.
I've never watched it. What this probably was is there was a period where I was just buying up cheap DVDs.
So you can't see his face though.
Yeah. That is so hilarious. We ought to do an episode where we like watch the movie and make snide comments and just like wreck it.
Like a Mystery Science Theater.
Exactly. How did you notice that, dude? It just caught your eye. Like, you guys can't see this, but there's just like rows of DVDs against the wall, and it caught your eye. I'm talking about Street Fighter Alpha, and you notice it.
I saw a Street Fighter logo. Like, I was like, what is that?
I thought you were gonna say reveal that I had some Street Fighter anime or something over there. Dude, that's hilarious. We did not plan that at all. It's a rental exclusive, by the way. apparently.
He probably got that out of like the $3 bin.
It cost me $1. Yeah, so it was I bought it because it was Street Fighter and that's it, and I didn't own it, and I was just bolstering my DVD collection, and I'm sure I had every intention to watch it when I bought it, but just like I'll watch that another time. Other better movies will come on.
Quite bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, Street Fighter Alpha, it introduced Dan. He was a hidden character. There were 3 hidden characters. Bison was a hidden character. He was a boss like in the game, but you could play as him by putting a code in.
Dan was an interesting character.
Dan, I always liked Dan, but Dan was interesting because like when this is the first time you really ever saw him, and it's like, oh look, it's another kind of Ryu Ken kind of clone, but his moves were different. And,
true.
Because he had like a different kind of like hurricane kick that, it was kind of like that little 3-hit kick kind of thing that it didn't spin like Ryu and Ken.
Yeah. It wasn't just a palette swap.
Because I mean, his moves had different frames of animation.
He had that little weak fireball.
Yeah, he had the fireball that didn't go across the screen.
Yeah, it wasn't a projectile.
It got weaker and weaker and weaker as the games went on too. It was probably its best in the original Street Fighter.
Dan became one of those insult like Balrog type characters for you. I remember like, oh, I'm gonna beat you with Dan. And you're like, you are not beating me with Dan. No, you're not. You bastard.
I like Dan. And
I know you did.
He definitely was the strongest in the first Street Fighter Alpha.
Yeah.
But
Dan also has a bit of history with his lineage.
Well, yeah, his dad. Well, and there's a piece of artwork that we'll have to put up there that there's from Street Fighter 2 that Sagat is kind of like he had just beat up Dan, and that's actually where the character came from, is like from this piece of artwork. But anyway, as the Street Fighter story goes, is that Dan's father Go Hibiki took Sagat's eye, and that's why Sagat has an eye patch, is because of Dan's father.
Very cool piece of information. And I was doing a little bit of research for Street Fighter, and that is something I didn't realize. Yeah. And like the little tidbits in history, like it's interesting because I realized reading some of these things that that's common knowledge to a lot of people, but that is probably one of those things that are common knowledge to a lot of Street Fighter fans, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I liked how it tied that together. Was Gobishi ever a playable character in any game? I guess it would be impossible because of the timelines.
He's appeared like in games kind of like Pocket Fighter that and we haven't even mentioned how Dan is also kind of a joke on Art of Fighting. He's kind of because of lawsuits and whatever between Art of Fighting, Capcom saying that Art of Fighting copied off of them and whatnot. That they decided we'll copy off of you. Then we'll make this character that's basically the body of Ryo Sakazaki and got the head of Robert Garcia from Art of Fighting and made it one character. So that's basically who Dan is.
Can I drop another bit of little factoid, I guess? You mentioned lawsuits, so it kind of came to my mind. There was a point around, I guess, this time that we were the height of Street Fighter Mania, and I guess the popularity was starting to fade a bit. So they partnered with Hasbro to take some G.I. Joe assets, and they actually made Street Fighter toys.
Yeah.
Which we were both super excited about.
We were very excited, and we bought some of those that were just blatant rip-offs of G.I. Joes that you just painted to look like Street Fighter characters.
Yeah. They were like 3.5-inch little G.I. Joes, and they actually had like dolls too. Like, we called them action figures, obviously, but they were dolls.
I got you had got Guile, I think, and I got an M Bison.
Yeah, and I had M Bison as well.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I bought them too. But so Mattel with Ken, and he's got that sandy blonde hair and that that look. Well, Mattel thought he looked a little bit too much like the Barbie Ken. So they actually threatened Capcom with a lawsuit. So I think part of that came from them actually getting into the toy business. Like, I doubt they would have gone after them if they were staying in their video game realm. But when they started making those toys, and especially those dolls, They were like, no, that's a ripoff of Ken. So because of that, Capcom actually gave Ken a last name, and that's where he got
so
his.
that's where Ken Masters came
Yeah,
from.
Ken Masters came about in part to keep Mattel off their back.
Well, I knew his last name, but I didn't know that story.
Yeah, and speaking of Ken, did you know he had a son?
Yeah, Mel.
Yeah, Mel. That was one of my little facts that I'd written down too. I knew he had a wife, but I didn't know he had a son. Like I don't remember ever reading that or seeing that.
Yeah, he.
It's odd to think that they had families.
He appears like in Ken's ending for Street Fighter 3.
Okay. Anyways, I'm sorry. back to where we were just talking about Alpha, I guess. So that came out in '95. Alpha 2 then came out in 1996.
And that introduced Sakura.
Yeah. Who was a favorite? I liked her.
Yeah.
She was because she played like Ryu.
Definitely a fan favorite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she was wearing like a schoolgirl uniform or whatever.
And that also brought back Gen. He was from Street Fighter 1. So it's cool to see him again.
Yeah. I'm sad to say that like the Alpha games, like I just didn't get into them as much.
Yeah.
Street Fighter Alpha 3, which is the next game that came out.
Well, but then before that though, there was an upgrade. Because how Capcom loves to do their upgrades.
Well, yeah.
So Japan
breathing
only.
New life.
There was an upgrade to Street Fighter Alpha, which in Japan, it's called Street Fighter Zero.
Yeah.
And so Street Fighter 02 had an upgrade called Street Fighter 02 Alpha.
It gets really confusing, you guys. These timelines in the games.
Yeah. So, that arcade upgrade never really came to the States in the form of an arcade, but that game did come to the States in the form of Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold for like the PlayStation and the Saturn, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I forget exactly. I think really the only changes in that were like it had like EX versions of characters. So it had like like Zangief and Dhalsim and Ryu and Ken. Pretty much everybody that appeared in Street Fighter 2, there was like a version of the character that was like that played like the Street Fighter 2 like kind of Champions Edition or one of those versions of it instead of how they appeared like in the Alpha series.
Well, you mentioned EX. That actually came out next.
Like the EX series?
Yeah. Can you... I never played EX. Can you describe what EX was?
EX was not like one of the in-house Capcom games. It was another company, Arica or something like that, that it was like the 3D version of Street Fighter. Everything's going to 3D polygons now,
right.
like Tekken and whatever. And so this was the Street Fighter, like trying to get into the world of 3D.
They're trying to not fall behind the times.
Yeah, and so, it was decent enough.
I remember people being excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't the same, you know.
It showed that they were not giving up on Street Fighter, but you still crave that old style of Street Fighter. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy that they didn't just go with EX. Like, they continued, for those who liked EX games, they made more of them. But, if you liked the Alpha games, they kept making those too.
Yeah, and so it was like another company making these. So, like, at that time, there were kind of like two games coming out, roughly around the same time. You had, like, the Alpha series was continuing on, and now the EX series
Yeah, it's kind of like how Call of Duty, like, they have, like, 2 or 3 different gaming studios, and they're working around the clock. And each year, like, one of the other studios releases a game that year. Yeah. And then, like one of the other studios releases the next year's game, and then the third studio releases a third, and then they go back to that first. Mm-hmm. So that's how they keep them rolling out every year. But there's actually 3 totally different teams doing the development of the game. So yeah, the EX games came out, but I'm also skipping quite a bit too. In 1997, we get a actual true sequel to Street Fighter.
Oh, so Street Fighter 3 finally comes out.
Yeah, Street Fighter 3 finally comes out, and I remember just not caring all that much.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things where I didn't see it anywhere.
We saw it like one place.
I remember I was on vacation, and we had stopped by like a mall or something, and I popped into an arcade, and they had Street Fighter 3. And like it was funny because the marquee didn't even say Street Fighter 3. It just straight up said 3. That's all they had to say is like
Okay.
3. Like Capcom
Three,
can
the
now
game.
count to 3.
Yeah.
Because they made like 5 Street Fighter 2 games.
Right. That was kind of a
so-
joke. It's like
yeah.
when 3 finally came out, they got a whole lot of mileage out of Street Fighter 2 from 91 to what we say 94, I guess is what we said. That's a long time to be in the arcades. And then they, took some time off with other types of Street Fighter games. They finally come back in 97.
Yeah, Street Fighter 3, it was very different. And first of all, the animation was like so like smooth. I mean, it was so beautiful as they're just like, in the standing animation, and the gi just kind of just flows up and down on their body.
Yeah.
And like when he does the fireball, and there's just like so
They're
many
like
more
winds
frames.
blowing, like
It's kind
their
of
geese kind of flapping
yeah,
because of the
flapping
force of the
around,
fireball.
and, yeah, just so cool.
It was superior in every way to
And
any Street Fighter game for the time.
And they took out like every recognizable character. There was just back
Ken
to Ryu and Ken again.
Yeah, yep.
And everybody else was new. And,
Bit of trivia: Ryu and Ken are the only characters to appear in every Street Fighter game.
Yeah, because that's how it was. From Street Fighter 1 to Street Fighter 2 to
Yep.
Street Fighter 3.
Yep.
Ryu and Ken were like the only ones.
Right.
And so they kind of followed suit there again.
I think I just didn't love the new characters, and maybe I was just mad that they weren't bringing back at least some of the old characters.
Yeah.
Like the booger guy who,
Oro.
Yeah, it was just such a weird cast.
I mean, he's yellow. He's like he's so weird looking.
Yeah, and they had like what was it, like a skateboard kid or something?
Yeah, Young and Yang, they're cool. I
Yeah,
kinda
they were
like them.
cool, but it just, I guess, like sometimes you're just resistant.
But
to
like,
change.
what's his name? Necro or Necro?
Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce it, but
Yeah.
he was like their version of Dawson.
Yeah,
It's like, why don't you just
why
have
not
Dawson?
just have Dawson? Yeah,
Yeah, because he was stretchy. Who else was there? There was
the chick.
Elena.
Yeah.
Elena. Dudley. He was kind of cool.
Dudley was kind of cool. I like Dudley. He had a familiar kind of like Sagat kind of feeling to him. They were. It was a fine game. It really was. It was a good game. It just, I think around that time, like the Marvel Capcom games were
The
like
boss
real
is
popular.
kind of weird. Gil.
Yeah,
And fighting you in like a loincloth.
I don't know. It was a bit of a misstep in my mind. Like it was a beautiful game.
But yeah, it's very different.
So yeah, that came out, and then I guess let's see. I said that was 97. Then another EX game came out.
And that introduced parries. Parries were very cool.
Yeah, parries were cool.
Yeah.
Well, I misspoke. I said parries and alpha, but that was just blocking in the air. Parries.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar, but
it
the alpha
added like
counters.
it was one of those like things about Street Fighter you love so much. Like it rewarded skill.
Yeah, and like the alpha counters, like in alpha, it took like a bar of your super meter, whereas parries you could just tap forward into the attack and do a parry at any
I never
time.
got really good at the parries.
I remember like wanting to get real good at it, so I took a lot of fireballs to the face because I'm like always trying to do a parry.
Yeah.
It's sometimes
to try to
it
get that
worked and
timing
sometimes
down.
it didn't.
Sure.
But
I never was able to work it in naturally.
But man, that Evo moment, like I mean that's a different game though. I think that was in Third Strike, but well I know it was in Third Strike because it was against Chun-Li. But we're like parrying like every single move of like Chun-Li's super. I mean that's a really cool video.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. When you watch videos like that and you're so humbled at how good these, because Street Fighter has been resurrected in like the esports arenas, like, which is why like, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself again.
Well that's in Third Strike, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, but EX Plus came out in 97, so like EX, X gonna give it to you. They got a little bit more.
Yeah, so they had a little upgrade for EX. Yeah.
Yep, that was in 97 as well.
Don't really have much to say.
I
for
don't
that.
either. So then Second Impact came out,
Yeah,
which is a
Street
game that
Fighter.
I don't, you'd mentioned to me, like so many people don't even know.
Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, yeah, that just kind of quietly came out to like nobody caring. I don't think
That was in 97
I don't
as
think
well.
I ever saw that in an arcade.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever seeing that.
But then in 98, Alpha 3 came out, and That's as close to a definitive Street Fighter game.
Oh well, we should go back. The Second Impact, Street Fighter 3 Second Impact,
Yeah.
Introduced
Okay.
Hugo, which was from Final Fight. So
Oh.
and he's been in other games since too.
Yeah, yeah.
So so that's kind of cool.
So that's noteworthy.
Yeah.
But Alpha 3 is a phenomenal game. Like
Alpha 3.
such a huge cast of characters to pick from. That's a game that I'll pick up like in an eShop from time to time.
Yeah, like Alpha 3 is very good.
When I got like my Vita, I remember buying it.
And it brought back finally like everybody that was missing from Street Fighter 2, so you get well, I was about ready to say Guile, but in the original Alpha 3, Guile wasn't there quite yet. It took another upgrade or two until finally you get Guile again. Because I think actually the home version brought him, and then I think there was like maybe an upgrade of the arcade called like Upper, like Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper or something like that finally brought Guile back. But anyway.
Yeah, so up until around this point, there was a Street Fighter game being released in the arcades every single year.
Yes.
Every year, and in some cases you got multiple games. But it's right around 98 that, or 99 actually.
Yeah, 99 is the last one.
That streak was about to come to an end, but Alpha 3 was a really fun game. Mm-hmm. And I really liked that one a lot. That's for sure the Alpha game that I played the most. And I think it's probably because it was just such a good port on consoles.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like I've already mentioned with so many too, not seeing them in the arcades. Mm. This is when the arcades were starting to die down because you had your PlayStation and whatnot.
Right.
That the game was like just as good, oftentimes better.
Yeah.
Because when they did bring it to the home version, they would bring it with new features. Mm-hmm. And so you were, often,
the incentive was to play on the console.
Yeah.
Really.
Because, like I had already mentioned about Alpha 3, that the console version had Guile, and Balrog, I think, too. He wasn't originally in Alpha 3, I don't think. And, so you got better versions of these games. And so, I don't really remember ever seeing Alpha 3 in the arcade, really.
I don't think I have either. I really remember seeing the first Alpha game, but that's it.
Yeah.
That's around, and when 3 came out,
and I remember when I did see the first Alpha, being super excited.
Yeah, I remember seeing it showcased some at the theater.
Oh yeah.
I think it was around Mortal Kombat 3, so I remember seeing that.
The first time I saw it was at the flea market.
Okay.
And just
it breathed fresh air into the series. It really did. Yeah. And kind of carried Street Fighter for a number of years. Yeah. So Alpha 3 came out. Then we had another EX game come out that same
EX2,
year.
and that brought in Sagat to the EX series. Yeah. So that was cool.
So EX2 came out in 98, and then also
actually that later on there was EX2 Plus. That one might have been the one that brought Sagat. I don't remember now. There's Vega.
Was that an arcade release?
Yeah, they are arcade releases. Because the console release would be like Street Fighter EX2 plus Alpha.
You're right.
It got ridiculous.
Jeez,
so
man.
Anyway, so Street Fighter 3
Third Strike came out in 99.
Now it comes out in 99. Yeah,
yep. And that was the string.
That brings back Chun-Li.
Yeah. So I'm more interested in Street Fighter again.
Yeah.
And I think Third Strike might have been the last I really saw in the arcades. So that was kind of the end.
Yeah, I didn't mention before, Second Impact also brought back Akuma so Akuma is now in the Street Fighter 3 series. And so now Third Strike, the Chun-Li, it's got Akuma. So now there's a couple more
some familiarity
faces, at least. Yeah.
But Third Strike I remember being a pretty good game. They kept updating it. And by the third time Third Strike came around, it was a bit more fun for me.
Yeah.
But like I said too, it was also kind of sad because it brought an end to the string of arcade games. Not ever, but every year that string of games.
Now Street Fighter kind of lays dormant for a while.
It did lay dormant for a bit. There was another Plus game that came out that same year.
Yeah.
EX2 Plus. Then you had told me this in 2003. There was an anniversary edition.
Oh yeah, and this actually came out on PlayStation 2 first. But then they released an arcade version of Hyper Street Fighter 2, the Anniversary Edition, which was basically, it was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, but it gave you the option when you select your character if you wanted to play the original Street Fighter 2 version, Champions Edition version, Turbo version, Super version, or Super Turbo version.
You know, something we kind of glossed over from the Alpha games was the styles. Kind of introduced like the different styles that you could choose from. Wasn't that an Alpha thing?
It was an Alpha 3 thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah, the A-ism,
yeah.
X-ism.
Yeah. It added a whole lot more depth to the game.
Yeah.
That game was just deep.
Yeah, where A-ism was like kind of the Alpha style. X-ism was like, like the original Street Fighter 2 kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
And V-ism had like the variable combo. Yeah. Where you could it was like a custom combo kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of cool.
All right, so we had that came out in 2003. I never saw that, but it did come out.
Well, yeah, I've never like actually seen one of those arcade cabinets in the wild. I hear it was really only a limited release, but it did.
It qualifies.
It did come to the arcades. Yeah.
Yeah. So 5 years after that, we got Street Fighter 4.
And I mean, you can't really count that really as, a new game. I mean, it's...
No, right. Yeah. It was a re-release. It was an anniversary edition.
I mean, it did add new features, like, the ability to, select the version of whichever, character, like... Because, like, Ryu was, like, so overpowered in Street Fighter 2, like the original Street Fighter 2, because they hadn't really balanced things, because, like, with Balrog, you could do, like, a hurricane kick, because, later on, they would make the hurricane kick where it would knock down on one hit, but in the original Street Fighter 2, it was very strong, but it could hit multiple times and get you dizzy, like, real quick.
Yeah, there was for sure a balancing issue with, those first games.
Yeah, so that Hyper Street Fighter 2 allowed you to, like, play, like, that version if you so desired, Yeah. So that was cool. But so anyway, yeah, so then Street Fighter 4 finally comes out. That was a huge deal.
It was. It was a return. It was a return of Street Fighter.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're finally making a new Street Fighter.
Mm-hmm. They came back, and I remember really liking it. It was a really good game.
And now it's all in 3D, 3D polygons, kind of like Street Fighter EX, only technology has advanced quite a bit since then.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and of course we never saw it in the arcades.
I mean, the way it played, it might as well have been hand drawn. It felt like the 2D.
It felt very old school, like it was a true sequel to 3.
Yeah.
So really impressive game. That was a 2008, and then in 2010 we got Super Street Fighter 4.
Yeah,
and your very Capcom move.
And like really, all of these, the only way we ever really played it is on the consoles.
Yeah,
but there were arcade.
Yeah, we were
versions.
playing on like Xbox at this time.
But these arcade versions though only came out in Japan. They didn't even come to the States.
Well, unless you were... Arcades at this point were like a novelty.
They were dead in the States.
They were completely dead. Unless you lived in a really large metropolitan city or Japan where arcades never died. They don't let cool stuff die in Japan. Yeah. It goes on and on and on. If they like something, they keep it around. But for us, we're like 100% console. But people are still buying their arcade sticks, and they're in the spirit. A whole new generation of Street Fighter fans are born.
Yeah.
So warmed my heart. It was really cool to see Street Fighter 4 come back and not be like some puny game.
Yeah.
They threw Capcom threw everything behind it.
It was successful.
I bought it.
It brought back fighting games.
It kind of did. It was like a renaissance period of fighting games. Yeah, fighting games were all but dead. I mean, everything was a shooting game at this point. Everything was like Halo.
After Street Fighter 2, everybody was getting into fighting games. Everybody's making the fighting games.
Good point. The clones.
The whole thing just died off.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2, you can't say enough like what a huge deal it was. I mean, not only financially, but it carried arcades for years. It was the trend, for sure. I look back and I reflect on gaming in my life. Street Fighter is one of probably 5 games that I really like extended over a long period of time that I was interested in.
Yeah.
It would be like Super Mario.
That's exactly what I was just gonna say. Yeah, there was like Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, Street Fighter.
Yeah, yeah, and and then after that, like games like Halo really captured my imagination. I played a lot of Halo, and now like Destiny. Like those are I mean, it's like Super Mario, Street Fighter, Halo, and Destiny. Like I really would consider those like my probably 4. I might in Zelda been 5, but
yeah, and at one time I might have said Mega Man, but that's kind of died off.
Yeah, but I mean, Street Fighter was just a massive, massive deal to everyone, and especially us. So like, it was very cool when you came up with the idea like we should do a Street Fighter episode after the news of the arcade mode being released in 5, which brings us to 5.
Yeah. We forgot there was Ultra Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, there was another version of Street Fighter 4 that came out.
So then Street Fighter 5 comes out in 2016.
Yeah, we're coming full circle. We started the show talking about 5 and how it was kind of disappointing. The game was awesome. It looks great.
And then that Street Fighter 5, when it came out in 2016, though, there was no arcade version.
No arcade version.
That was only on the console.
Yep.
And so now, full circle, in 2018, there's going to be an arcade version. Not just like an arcade mode on the console version, but they're actually in Japan. There will be an arcade version.
Maybe it's just a coincidence, but they're also releasing an arcade version in Japan of Street Fighter 5.
Yeah, so it's about time.
The lineage continues. Yeah. Street Fighter will always be an arcade sensation. It made its way to home consoles and was very, very successful. Another one of my factoids. Street Fighter, the franchise, was the most profitable franchise for Capcom ever. More than Mega Man, more than any other series.
I believe it.
It was only bested by Resident Evil when Resident Evil 5 came out. It planted them. It overtook them.
That's interesting. I'm actually kind of surprised it even did that.
Resident Evil, because of all the copies that Street Fighter sold for Super Nintendo. I still think to this day that a single game that's their most that they've sold is the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter. But as a franchise, it's actually Resident Evil is their most. It's made the most money for them. I know, interesting fact. But up until Resident Evil 5, it was Street Fighter, and that you can very much believe because it was everywhere in pop culture. Another little factoid. I found this really interesting. I gotta pull up my little factoid section now. Sorry, everybody.
You just want to say factoid.
Factoid! Ron's factoids. Oh, we didn't even mention the whole combo thing. You wanna take that one, Nick?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, the combos. Combos in fighting games is like so much of a thing now, and it was like such the accident.
It was a happy accident,
yeah, just a happy accident, and all they were like at the time were like the 2-in-1s where you could find out that you can, kind of chain like this fierce punch into a fireball like in kind of one like kind of fluid motion that the opponent can't block it because it just goes from one to the other.
Yeah. Very fun to do.
Yeah, so the combos were just it was only just a couple hits in those days, where now it's like 100 hit combo.
Well, Killer Instinct and games like that took it really extreme. But I thought you would handle that one there. So Street Fighter was such a pop culture thing that I looked this up. There's like 80 instances, where like a rapper has sampled Street Fighter 2 in their song.
I know, I've heard quite a few of them.
As recently as this year, Kanye West has a song where it's sampling like the Street Fighter 2 sound effects. It's a song called Fact, and there's there's like 3 or 4 instances in the song where you hear like, you know, Street Fighter in the game, like from the.
I had the probably still do. I'd have to look. The Street
Artists
Fighter,
like Jay-Z has Kanye, Jay-Z, Drake. I mean, big names.
yeah, I bought that Street Fighter the movie soundtrack from the 1995 movie.
Well, soundtracks were big back in the day, and the Mortal Kombat soundtrack was pretty good, so I
Yeah.
can see why you would do that. Well, this came out before Mortal Kombat. Why did you do that? It was Street Fighter, right? You
There
just
were
bought it
there
up.
were 1 or 2 songs on there I kind of liked, you know, and it was fun too, just like listening to them like throw in like these Street Fighter terms, because I remember like one in particular, they would be like Tiger Uppercut, you know?
Like in the like lyrics, they would
they would
not
just, like,
sample
throw
from
in
the game, but an actual lyric.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess like in the times of like Wu-Tang Clan too, like it was, you know, hip hop and rap and like kung fu and stuff kind of merged a bit.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. But I think it's just to give you an idea what a big deal Street Fighter was. So, you know, that's our little tribute to Street Fighter. I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah.
You know,
It was fun.
It was
fun to
cool.
talk about.
I looked forward to doing more episodes like this one. You know, we'll come up with some good ones. So I'd mentioned a couple, you know, before the show that I think would make good tributes. Anything else we can really? I don't have any more factoids.
No more factoids.
I'm all out.
Yeah,
There's lots of little interesting pieces of trivia out there that you could find, but I just thought those were the most interesting of all of them.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess we can just end it at that. You know, is there anything from the museum you think that we could throw up?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look for a couple things.
Throw up a picture of this or something. Me posing with it. All right. So, you know, check out the BitGeeks Facebook page if you don't mind. You know, give us a like there. That's where we have, you know, a dedicated space for whenever we mention things in the podcast.
But
Do
I
you have any more of those
remember as we were
toys? Do you
talking
still have
about-
those anymore?
I don't. Oh yeah, maybe a couple of them. I think I know where they are. Yeah, I'll look for the G.I. Joe toys.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have the big bison, but I think I've got some of the little ones.
Cool.
Maybe.
All right.
But yeah, and I remember as we were talking, there was 1 or 2 things that I remembered that I need to look for. So.
Well, you know, you've been doing an awesome job keeping the Facebook page, you know, updated.
Try to get a few pictures up there.
Yeah, it's fun for like things that don't really fit well for the video.
Yeah.
We mention them and then we throw them up on the Facebook page. So check us out there, like us there. If you like the video, please give us a like, subscribe if you haven't already. We really appreciate it. I guess that's really all we got to say about Street Fighter.
Yeah. Hadouken!
Hadouken! Thanks for watching the Big Geeks. We'll talk to you next week.